This is a question from IPM Indore 2023 paper, QA section, although the question is more like a logical reasoning question. So the question says, a pharmaceutical company has tested 5 drugs on 3 different organisms. The following incomplete table reports if a drug works on the given organisms. For example, drug A works on organism R, while B and C work on Q. So we are given this partially filled table, and A, B, C, D, E, these are 5 drugs. P, Q, and R, they are 5 organisms, probably bacteria, viruses, and something else. So these drugs work on at least one of these organisms, and in some cases they work on 2 organisms, right? So this information is given here. Each drug works on at least one organism, but at not more than 2 organisms. So what does that mean? So if I draw the table here, so the first point says each drug works on at least one organism, but not more than 2 organisms. That means in each row, there will be at least one tick and at most 2 ticks, right? So in each row, there will be at least one tick because each drug works at least on one organism. So because drug A has already worked on R, it will not work on both P and Q. Similarly, drug B has already worked on Q and C also has worked on Q. They may not work on both P and R. So they will work only on one of P or R, or they may not work on both P and R. So it could be both crosses, or it could be one tick and one cross. So in one row, we cannot have 3 ticks. It could be one tick or 2 ticks. So that is the meaning of first line. Second line, each organism can be treated with at least 2 and at most 3 of these 5 drugs. So each organism will be treated by at least 2. So for example, Q is treated by B and C. That means Q can be treated by only one of the other 3 more. Or it could be none of the other 3 also, because minimum it should be 2 and maximum it should be 3. So each each organism can be treated by at least 2 and at most 3. So there may be one more tick, or there may be all 3 crosses. So in one column, there could be 2 or 3 ticks. In one row, there could be 1 or 2 ticks, right? So that is the basic idea. Now, on whichever organism A works, B also works. Similarly, on whichever organism C works, B also works. Now, this is not the other way around. On whichever organism A works, B also works. That means if A works on B, then B must also work on P. But if B works on Q, then A may not work on Q, right? It only says on whichever organism A works, on that B must work. But on whichever mechanism A does not work, Q may work on that organism also, right? So that is the meaning of the third point. So A and B, if A works, then B works on that organism. Similarly, if C works, then D also works on that organism. So from this point, we can say if C works on organism Q, then D should also work on organism Q. So this is definitely true. Then let us come to the last point. D and E do not work on the same organism. So if D has already worked on Q, then E cannot work on Q, right? So this is the information that we are given. Now let us start from the top again. Each drug is at least one. Okay, so we have discussed that in one column there can be 2 or 3 ticks. So in this column there are already 3 ticks. That means A does not work on Q, right? So if A does not work on Q, A works on R, that means B must work on R. Point 3 says if A works, then B also works on that organism. So A works on R, so B also works on R. Now, in this row, we have two ticks. In a row, there can be maximum two ticks. That means B cannot work on P. If B does not work on P, that means A also cannot work on P. Because if A works on P, then B must work on P also. Then there will be three ticks in this row, which is not possible. There can be maximum two ticks. So B and A, they should not work on P. Right? Now it also says that D and E, they do not work on same organisms. Also C and D, they work on, if C works on some organism, then D must also work on that organism. So now we'll have to take some assumption. If C works on P, then C cannot work on R. And if C works on P, then D must also work on P. Then D also cannot work on R. And if that is the case, then E cannot work because D and E, they do not work on same organisms. And E must work on here, on R. So that is the table that we have filled. So here there was an assumption that we took. We assumed that C works on P and does not work on R. We could have also assumed the other way around if we go that way. So if C works on R and not on P, then D must also work on both Q and R. And if that is the case, then D cannot work on P. And in that case, there are four crosses. There can be only one tick in this P column, which is not possible because there must be two or three ticks in one column. That means this assumption is not correct. So we'll have to go by our first assumption where C works on P and hence D also works on P. They both do not work on R. And because of that, E does not work on P. E also does not work on Q and E works on R. So with that, all the conditions are met. Then we can answer all the questions. I hope you will be able to answer the questions. I will not do that in this video. If the table is filled, then questions can be answered.